When we look at the ruins of the Indus Valley, what strikes us most is not their grandeur, but their order, streets laid out like a careful grid, houses aligned with precision, drains running neatly beneath them, where other ancient civilizations built temples to reach the gods or palaces to glorify kings. The Indus people built cities that seemed designed not for spectacle, but for life itself. Imagine standing on a high wall of Mohenjo-Daro, looking down upon the city as it once was. The streets stretch outward, straight and true, forming squares and rectangles. Houses cluster along them, each built of baked brick, each fitting into the pattern as if guided by a larger vision. Wells rise at intervals, providing water for every neighborhood. Granaries stand nearby, their massive brick platforms designed for storing grain. At the city's heart lies the Great Bath, a space not for rulers, but for community. The uniformity of the bricks tells a story of extraordinary organization. Each brick was shaped to a standard ratio: length twice its width, thickness half the width. Whether found in Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, or smaller towns, the bricks follow the same rule. This was not chance, but system. Someone, or perhaps many working together, decided that order mattered, that harmony of design was worth the effort. Even today, the precision is remarkable, a quiet testimony to a civilization that valued structure over chaos. The streets were more than paths for walking. They were arteries of life, guiding the flow of people, carts, and animals. Wide avenues intersected with narrower lanes, creating a rhythm that balanced openness and intimacy. Alongside them ran covered drains, engineered with slopes to carry waste away from homes. This concern for cleanliness, for public health, was far ahead of its time. Imagine walking down one of these streets in the evening, the bricks worn beneath your feet, the sound of water flowing beneath, lamps flickering in the courtyards of houses. The city feels alive, but never overwhelming, carefully balanced like a woven cloth. The houses themselves tell us of daily dignity. Many had multiple rooms arranged around a courtyard, with staircases leading to upper floors. Some had bathing areas, floors sloping gently toward drains. Privacy was respected. Doors often opened not directly onto the street, but into side alleys or courtyards. It is as though the people sought to balance community with individual space, creating homes that nurtured both family and society. Granaries reveal the collective nature of the Indus people. These massive structures, built upon raised platforms, with air ducts for ventilation, were designed to store surplus grain. They speak not only of farming success, but of planning for the future, of preparing for times of scarcity. The grain was likely collected from farmers, measured, stored, and distributed in ways that ensured balance. It suggests a society less concerned with individual wealth and more with shared stability. The Great Bath, too, fits this vision. Unlike the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia or the pyramids of Egypt, it was not a monument to gods or kings. Instead, it was a communal space, for bathing, for purification, perhaps for ritual. To descend its steps and immerse oneself in its waters was to join in a rhythm of shared life, a quiet act of unity. What is most haunting about these cities is how modern they feel. The concern for hygiene, the emphasis on planning, the uniformity of design, these are qualities we often associate with later ages, with modern engineering. Yet here, thousands of years ago, the people of the Indus built cities that rivaled our own in thoughtfulness. They remind us that progress is not always linear, that what we call modern may in truth be ancient wisdom rediscovered. Picture yourself walking through Mohenjo-Daro at twilight. The streets glow with the warm light of oil lamps. Families sit in courtyards, their voices rising softly. Water flows quietly through covered drains. The air is calm, balanced, alive with the hum of order. You feel safe, not because of towering walls or the presence of guards, but because the city itself has been designed with care, with thought, with love for life. The Indus cities were not monuments of conquest. They were monuments of balance. Their design speaks not of rulers, but of people, not of war, but of life. And in their silence, they whisper to us still, civilization need not be loud to endure. Sometimes it is the quiet order of streets, the humble harmony of bricks, that carries the deepest wisdom. As you rest, let this image settle gently in your mind, streets aligned with the stars, houses glowing with lamplight, water flowing in hidden channels, the city itself breathing as a living design. The Indus Valley reminds us that civilization can be a song of balance, a gentle hum of order, a whisper of harmony across the centuries. Every civilization, no matter how carefully built, carries within it the seeds of its end. The Indus Valley, with its order, its trade, its silent script, seemed eternal in its calm. And yet, after centuries of flourishing, its cities grew quiet. Streets that once bustled with merchants fell silent. Courtyards where families had gathered filled with dust. The great bath, once shimmering with water, lay empty beneath the sun. Why did it fade? Why did one of the world's earliest civilizations vanish, leaving no voice to tell its story? One answer lies in the rivers themselves. The Indus and its tributaries were the lifeblood of the civilization. They gave water for fields, silt for fertility, roots for trade. But rivers are restless things. Over centuries, they shift, they flood, they dry. Geological studies suggest that some tributaries, like the Saraswati or Gagarhakra, may have dried or changed course. A city built along a river that vanished would wither. Its fields parched, its wells empty. Imagine the silence of a canal once filled with flowing water, now cracked and dry under the sun. Families would have had no choice but to leave, carrying with them memory but leaving behind bricks. Climate, too, played a part. Around the time of the Indus decline, the monsoons weakened. Rains grew less steady, seasons less predictable. Drought spread across the plains. Farmers who had once reaped abundant harvests found their fields failing. Granaries once filled with grain stood half empty. Hunger, slow and heavy, may have driven people to seek new lands, new rivers, new hope. There are also traces of floods. In Mohenjo-Daro, layers of silt cover the ruins, suggesting that the city may have been struck repeatedly by rising waters. Imagine the river swelling beyond its banks, sweeping through streets, filling homes, erasing fields. Each time the people rebuilt, but after enough floods, even the strongest spirit may have given way to exhaustion. Some speak, too, of disease. The close quarters of great cities, the flowing waters of drains and baths, may have carried illnesses that spread unseen. Without words to record them, we cannot know. But perhaps sickness, like drought and flood, played its quiet role in the fading of the Indus. There is also the question of invasion. Later texts from distant cultures speak of Aryans, nomadic peoples moving into the region. Some theories suggest conflict, displacement, or cultural blending. Yet the ruins of the Indus do not show great battles, no walls toppled by war, no mass graves of conquest. If outsiders came, they did not destroy with fire and sword, but perhaps absorbed and replaced slowly as new ways of life spread across the plains. The truth is likely not one cause, but many: rivers shifting, rains weakening, floods striking, people moving. Civilization is fragile, balanced on the rhythms of nature and the cooperation of communities. When the rhythms falter, even the strongest cities can fade. Imagine being among the last families to leave Mohenjo-Daro. The streets are quiet, the wells shallow, the granary half empty. You walk past the great bath, now dry, its bricks crumbling. You hear the wind moving through empty houses, once filled with laughter and life. You lead your cattle away from the city, your children at your side, carrying clay pots and memories. You do not know if you will return, but you know the river no longer sustains you. Step by step, the city fades behind you, left to silence. And yet, the people did not vanish. They moved, they changed, They carried with them seeds of memory. The Indus Valley faded as a civilization, but its descendants continued blending into new cultures, speaking new languages, shaping new traditions. The silence of the cities does not mean the silence of the people. They endured as people always do, flowing like water into new channels. As you drift now into rest, imagine the slow fading of these cities. Not sudden, not violent, but gradual, like the dimming of a lamp. The light still glows faintly, but then it softens, then it flickers, then it is gone. And in the quiet, only the ruins remain, whispering of what once was. The Indus Valley reminds us that even the greatest order can fade, yet its memory endures in silence, waiting to be heard. Civilizations fade, but their echoes remain. The Indus Valley, though its script is silent and its kings unnamed, did not vanish without leaving traces. Its gifts, subtle yet enduring, flow forward into later cultures, like rivers splitting into many streams. Though the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro lie in ruins, their influence lives on in ways so quiet we sometimes forget their source. Consider first the art of order. The Indus people valued harmony, balance, and cleanliness. Their cities were laid out in grids, their bricks made to precise ratios, their drains covered and efficient. These ideas did not die with them. Later cities in South Asia, though different in form, carried echoes of this concern for planning. Wells, courtyards, and baths became part of the architectural tradition. The idea that a city should serve its people, that water should be managed, that homes should be dignified spaces, these are legacies that ripple outward, subtle but profound. The Indus Valley may also have been among the first to cultivate cotton, spinning it into cloth and weaving it into garments. From this ancient beginning came a tradition that still defines South Asia today: the skill of weaving, the beauty of textiles, the comfort of cotton. Every piece of cloth spun in the centuries that followed carries within it a whisper of the Indus, of hands that first drew thread from plant to loom. Their symbols, too, live on. Though the script is undeciphered, certain motifs echo in later traditions. The bull, strong and enduring, continues to be revered. The mother goddess figurines may have seeded later cults of fertility and earth. The fire altars uncovered at Kalibangan suggest practices that resonate faintly with later Vedic rituals. While we must be cautious not to draw straight lines, we can sense connections, like faint threads woven through time. Even their sense of balance in society may have left traces. The Indus people did not carve monuments to kings, nor did they glorify conquest. Their civilization speaks of cooperation, of shared systems, of community. Later cultures in the region often celebrated rulers and warriors, yet beneath those layers we still find traditions of village councils, local assemblies, and communal decisions. Perhaps these reflect not only later innovation, but deep roots, reaching back to the Indus. Imagine the people who left Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa when the rivers shifted and the rains grew thin. They did not vanish into the air. They carried their tools, their seeds, their ornaments, their customs. They taught their children how to farm, how to weave, how to shape clay. As they mingled with other peoples, their traditions blended, absorbed, reshaped. Over generations, what had once been Indus became part of new cultures, not visible as a separate identity, but present as quiet influence. The river itself remains part of the legacy. The Indus still flows, winding its way through lands where millions live today. Farmers still draw water from its banks, fields still flourish with grain, herders still lead their cattle along its edges. The river carries memory, even if unspoken, connecting present life with ancient roots. To drink from its waters is, in a sense, to drink from history. The legacy of the Indus is not one of empires and armies, but of subtler gifts: planning, balance, craft, ritual, and resilience. It reminds us that civilization is not always about conquest, but about harmony, not always about rulers, but about communities, not always about noise, But about quiet entrance. As you rest now, imagine the Indus, flowing steadily, its waters carrying both silt and memory. Picture the cotton fields swaying in the breeze, the courtyards glowing with lamps, the weavers spinning thread, the farmers tending cattle. Though the names are gone, the practices remain. The Indus Valley whispers through every field, every loom, every village that grew in its shadow. The people may be silent, but their legacy flows still, like the river itself, gentle, persistent, eternal. For thousands of years, the Indus Valley Civilization lay hidden, its cities buried beneath layers of soil, its story forgotten. Travelers passed over its ruins. Farmers plowed fields above its walls, villages grew on top of its ancient streets. The memory of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro faded into silence, known only as nameless mounds rising from the earth. It was not until the 19th and early 20th centuries that the Indus Valley returned to the world's awareness. British engineers, working on railways in the Punjab, noticed strange bricks unearthed during construction. They were larger, harder, more uniform than local bricks, and they had been fired, not sun-dried. The engineers used them to lay railway tracks, not knowing they were walking on the remains of one of the world's earliest civilizations. Soon, archaeologists began to look more closely. Excavations at Harappa revealed walls, streets, and pottery, unlike anything known in the region. At first, some thought the ruins were from a late phase of another civilization, perhaps tied to Mesopotamia. But as the digging continued, as layers of brick and streets of uniform design emerged, it became clear this was something different, something ancient, something forgotten. Then came Mohenjo-Daro, its name meaning mound of the dead. Beneath the mound lay a city preserved in silence, streets aligned in perfect grids, wells scattered through neighborhoods, drains running beneath the bricks, houses with courtyards and staircases. The Great Bath, its steps leading into stillness. To uncover these was to realize that here lay not a village, not a fortress, but a city older than many known to history. The rediscovery was a revelation. Until then, the great civilizations of antiquity were thought to be only those of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China. India's ancient history was believed to begin with the Vedic period, its hymns and rituals carried in oral tradition. But here was evidence of something older, deeper, broader, a civilization contemporary with Mesopotamia and Egypt, thriving on its own terms, yet silent in texts. Imagine the excitement of the archaeologists as they brushed away the soil, revealing streets that had not been walked for thousands of years. Each layer told a story. Pottery painted with geometric designs, beads polished with care, seals carved with symbols no one could read. The city revealed itself slowly, like a dream returning after long sleep. Yet the rediscovery also brought mystery. The script remained undeciphered. No monuments to kings were found. Numbered temples towering above the streets. Instead, the Indus spoke of balance, of order, of community. It challenged assumptions about what civilization meant. Where were the rulers? Where were the wars? The Indus Valley seemed to thrive without them, and in doing so, it unsettled the narrative of history built upon conquest. In time, more sites were found. Lothal, with its dockyard and workshops. Kalibangan, with its fire altars. Dholavira, with its reservoirs carved into stone. Each discovery widened the map, showing that the Indus was not a single city but a vast network, stretching across rivers and plains. Picture yourself as one of those first archaeologists, standing in the dust as the sun sets over Mohenjo-Daro. Before you lies a street uncovered from the earth, its bricks glowing in the light. You kneel, tracing the outline of a drain with your hand, feeling the precision of its design. Aren't you? The silence is profound. You realize that you are among the first in thousands of years to walk here, to see what was hidden. The city speaks, not in words, but in stones, and you listen in wonder. The rediscovery of the Indus Valley was not just an archaeological achievement. It was a reminder that history is never complete. Beneath our feet lie worlds forgotten, waiting for patient hands to reveal them. It was also a lesson in humility, that civilizations may thrive without leaving behind the kinds of records we expect, that greatness can exist in silence, that memory can sleep for millennia, and still awaken. As you drift into rest, imagine those ancient streets uncovered, the dust brushed away, the city returning slowly to light. The Indus Valley, once forgotten, was remembered again, not fully, not clearly, but enough to remind us that the past is vast, and the rivers of memory run deeper than we know. Among the most haunting artifacts of the Indus Valley are its seals, small squares of carved stone, smooth to the touch, yet filled with mystery. They are no larger than the palm of a hand, yet each carries images and symbols that whisper of a world we cannot fully see, found in homes, workshops, and distant lands. These seals are the closest thing the Indus people left us to their written voice. And yet, that voice remains silent, undeciphered, patient as stone. Imagine holding one in your hand. It is carved from steatite, its surface polished, its lines sharp despite the passing of thousands of years. On it stands a bull, strong and steady, its horns curved with grace. Above the bull are small marks, strokes, loops, circles arranged in a line. They look purposeful, like writing, but we cannot read them. Were they names, prayers, records of trade? The meaning lies locked within the stone, unbroken across the ages. Thousands of such seals have been found. Some depict animals, elephants, rhinoceroses, tigers, water buffalo, goats. Others show creatures that may be mythic, a unicorn-like beast, a composite figure with many features blended. Some show human-like figures seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals, in poses that feel both ritual and serene. Each seal is both familiar and strange, as if glimpsing a dream whose language is forgotten. The seals likely served many purposes. They may have been used in trade, pressed into clay to mark ownership of goods. A merchant might have stamped his seal onto a bundle of cotton or a jar of grain, ensuring it carried his mark across distances. They may also have been used in ritual, carried as amulets, their images serving as protective symbols. Some may have been tokens of identity, the signs of families, clans, or guilds. But beyond practical use, the seals carry a weight of meaning we can only imagine. The bull, symbol of strength and fertility; the elephant, of wisdom and endurance; the unicorn-like beast, perhaps a creature of myth, embodying purity or mystery; the cross-legged figure, perhaps an early vision of meditation, of harmony between human and animal, of spirit seated among life. Each symbol feels deliberate, layered with significance. Archaeologists and scholars have debated the script above the animals for more than a century. Some argue it records a Dravidian language, ancestor to those spoken in South India today. Others suggest it is a lost tongue, unrelated to any known. Computer analysis shows that the signs are not random, but follow patterns like speech. Yet without a Rosetta Stone, without a bilingual inscription, the silence remains. The script is like music we cannot hear, a story written in an unknown tongue. Still, the silence speaks. The sheer number of seals tells us they mattered deeply. The care with which they were carved tells us they were valued. Their presence in distant Mesopotamia tells us they traveled far, carrying Indus identity beyond its rivers. To hold a seal is to hold a fragment of connection between people, between lands, between the practical and the sacred. Imagine a craftsman in Mohenjo-Daro. Seated at his workbench in the dim light of evening, he carves carefully into stone, shaping an animal, etching symbols above it. His tools are simple, but his hand is steady, his skill profound. On him lie finished seals, each with its own story, each destined to travel. Pressed into clay, worn on a cord, carried by merchants, offered in rituals. The craftsman does not know that thousands of years later, his work will be held again, studied, wondered over. He only knows the quiet satisfaction of completing a seal, of giving form to meaning in stone. The seals remind us that the Indus Valley, though silent, was not empty. Its people spoke, prayed, traded, dreamed. Their words may be lost, but their images endure. And perhaps that is enough, for in these seals we glimpse their imagination, their symbols, their connection to the world. The silence may never be broken, but the whisper is still heard. As you rest, picture the seals glowing softly in lamplight, their animals alive in shadow, their symbols aligned like stars. Imagine them pressed into clay, leaving impressions that travel across time. The story remains locked, but the presence is undeniable. The Indus Valley may not speak in words, but in seals, it leaves us the poetry of silence. Civilizations are built not first on stone or trade, but on soil. Beneath every city, beneath every marketplace, beneath every seal and ornament, lies the earth that fed the people. The Indus Valley, for all its silent mysteries, was a civilization of farmers, men and women who tilled the fields, planted seeds, drew water from rivers, and turned the gifts of the earth into life. Without their patience, their rhythm, their skill, there would have been no Harappa, no Mohenjo-Daro, no civilization at all. The river was their ally, their guide, their teacher. Each year, its floods spread silt across the plains, renewing the soil with fertility. The Indus people learned to read its moods, to prepare their fields, to welcome the water when it came. Canals channeled the flow, guiding it into crops. Fields stretched outward, green in spring, golden at harvest. The river gave not only water but a steady rhythm, a cycle of planting and reaping that marked the passage of time. Imagine a morning in the fields. Outside Harappa, the sun rises slowly, warming the mist that clings to the land. Farmers move with oxen, wooden plows cutting gentle furrows into the soil. Birds call from the reeds, fish glimmer in the canals. Women carry baskets of seed, scattering them with practiced hands, their movements fluid, almost ritual. Children follow, chasing each other along the edges of the fields, their laughter mingling with the lowing of cattle. The earth smells rich, damp, alive. The day has begun. The Indus people grew wheat, barley, peas, sesame, and lentils. They tended cotton, spinning it into cloth that became one of their most valued exports. They cultivated dates and melons, filling baskets with sweetness. They raised cattle, sheep, and goats, drawing milk, meat, and wool. Their diet was rich and varied, not the meager survival of a struggling people, but the balanced abundance of those who understood their land. Agriculture was more than food, it was memory. Seeds were saved from each harvest, carried forward into the next season. Tools were shaped with care, wooden plows, stone blades, copper sickles. Farmers read the skies, the winds. The rivers flow, learning the unspoken language of nature. To farm was not only to labor, but to join in the cycle of life, to live in harmony with the earth's quiet voice. Granaries reveal their foresight. Built of brick, raised on platforms with air channels for ventilation, they stored surplus grain. This was not the labor of individuals, but of communities, ensuring that when floods failed or rains weakened, the people would endure. The granaries are silent now, their walls crumbling, but once they held the harvests of thousands, guarded against hunger, symbols of care that reached beyond the moment. Agriculture shaped the rhythm of society. Planting in spring, harvest in autumn, rest in between. Festivals likely marked these transitions, with music, dancing, offerings of grain to fire or water. Children born during harvest carried the blessing of abundance. Elders told stories of past floods and great harvests, teaching patience to the young. The fields were not only work, but life's very stage, where memory and hope met in the soil. Animals, too, were partners in this life. Bulls pulled the plows, their strength steady, their image sacred enough to appear on seals. Cattle gave milk, sheep gave wool, goats gave meat and hide. Dogs guarded flocks, Cats slipped quietly through grain stores, protecting them from pests. Each creature had its place, each woven into the harmony of survival. Picture the fields at sunset. The day's work is done, the oxen led back to pens, the tools stored. Farmers gather in small groups, speaking softly of weather and crops. Children run home carrying bundles of straw. The air cools, the sky glows with shades of gold and red. In the distance, the river shimmers, reflecting the light. The fields rest silent, but alive with promise. Tomorrow, the rhythm will continue. The Indus Valley's greatness lay not only in its cities, but in its soil. The farmers, unnamed and unremembered, were the foundation of all. They built not with bricks, but with seeds. They raised not monuments, but harvests, and in their patience, they sustained one of the world's first civilizations. As you drift into calm, imagine the soft rustle of grain in the wind, the steady plod of oxen, the laughter of children among fields. Imagine the smell of earth after rain, the taste of bread baked from wheat, the glow of a harvest festival beneath the stars. The Indus people may be silent now, but their fields still speak. Fields that once fed a world, and whose memory lingers in every grain of soil along the rivers. Civilizations are not only remembered for their fields or their rulers, but also for what they make with their hands. The Indus Valley, silent in writing but eloquent in objects, speaks most clearly through its crafts. Pottery, beads, ornaments, tools, and textiles all reveal a people who valued beauty as much as function, precision as much as imagination. Imagine a workshop in Harappa. The sun is high, the air warm, and the space is alive with movement. A potter sits at a wheel, his hands steady as the clay spins beneath him. The vessel rises slowly, shaped with patience, its form symmetrical, its walls smooth. Nearby, a bead maker polishes carnelian until it glows like fire, drilling tiny holes with a skill so fine that even modern tools strain to replicate it. A metalworker hammers copper into blades, chisels, and ornaments, the sound of his hammer ringing like a steady heartbeat. Around them, children watch, learning, absorbing the skills that will sustain their world. Pottery was one of their greatest expressions. Vessels of red or buff clay fired carefully, painted with black designs, fish, birds, geometric patterns, swirls of lines that seemed both decoration and symbol. Some jars were large, used for storage of grain or water. Others were small, delicate, perhaps used in rituals or as offerings. To hold one is to feel the balance between practicality and art, between utility and beauty. Bead making was an art almost magical. Carnelian, agate, faience, shell, and steatite were transformed into ornaments of stunning precision. Long carnelian beads, polished to shine, were worn on strings that may have traveled as far as Mesopotamia. Faience beads, glazed with colors of turquoise and green, shimmered like drops of captured water. Shell ornaments, carved into bangles, were worn upon wrists that once gestured, once touched, once lived. Each bead carried not only beauty, but connection, to trade, to identity, to the unseen meaning of adornment. Metalwork revealed their ingenuity. Copper and bronze tools, axes, chisels, needles, show both practicality and precision. They were not weapons of conquest, but tools of craft, of farming, of building. Yet ornaments too were forged, small figurines of animals, delicate bangles, pins and amulets. The famous bronze dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro, a tiny figure yet full of grace, stands as a symbol of this artistry. Her stance, confident and alive, captures not only a person but a civilization in motion, poised with elegance. Textiles, though little survives, leave traces in impressions on clay and in tools of weaving. Cotton, cultivated in the Indus Valley, was spun into thread, woven into cloth, dyed with colors drawn from plants and earth. Imagine the weavers at their looms, threads stretched taut, hands moving rhythmically, patterns forming beneath their fingers. Cloth carried not only warmth and protection, but beauty, identity, and trade. It was one of the gifts the Indus people offered to the wider world. Craftsmanship was not confined to elite objects. Toys, too, reveal their hands, small play carts with wheels that turned, figurines of bulls and birds, rattles for children. The joy of play mattered as much as the utility of tools. Even in these toys, we see the precision of their work. Love of form, the delight in detail. Technology shaped daily life in countless ways. We see it in the uniform bricks of their cities, fired to precise ratios. We see it in the carefully engineered drains, covered and sloped to carry waste away. We see it in weights and measures, standardized across wide distances, allowing trade to flow with trust. These were not simple inventions, but systems, technologies woven into society, shaping the rhythm of life. Imagine walking through the market of Mohenjo-Daro at midday. Stalls display pottery painted with birds, beads shimmering in sunlight, bangles carved from shell. Merchants weigh grain on balances with precise stone weights, confident that the system is shared across the land. Children tug at their mothers' hands, pointing at clay toys shaped like bulls with rolling wheels. Craftsmen call out, offering their wares. The air is filled with color, with sound, with the hum of a civilization alive in its making. The Indus Valley may not have left us kings or conquests, but it left us objects that speak in silence. Each bead polished with care, each pot painted with patience, each tool shaped with precision. All are fragments of lives lived with dignity, skill, and imagination. As night falls, picture a craftsman's workshop glowing in lamplight. The will still spin slowly, the beads still gleam, the metal still glows faintly from the fire. Hands that shaped beauty now rest, but their work endures. Thousands of years later, we hold their objects, and through them we touch their lives. The Indus people remind us that civilization is not only what we build, but what we create. Not only the bricks of our cities, but the beads, the pots, the ornaments, the toys, the small things that carry beauty into daily life. Their legacy is not carved in words, but in objects shaped by hands that knew both function and art. As you drift toward rest, imagine holding a polished bead, a painted pot, a small toy bowl. Feel the patience in its making, the life in its form, the beauty in its silence. These are the voices of the Indus, voices not of kings, but of craftsmen, artisans, and families, whose work still whispers across time. Civilizations rise along rivers, but they do not stop at their banks. The waters that flow to the sea carry more than silt. They carry dreams of connection, of goods traveling beyond the horizon, of voices heard in distant lands. The Indus Valley, though rooted in fields and cities, reached outward as well, extending its touch across deserts, mountains, and seas. Among its most remarkable sights stands Lothal, a port city, a gateway, a bridge between the Indus and the wider world. Imagine approaching Lothal as it once was. The air is filled with the smell of salt, the cries of seabirds, the bustle of merchants and craftsmen. A dockyard lies at the city's edge, its massive basin carved with precision, designed to hold ships that came and went with the tides. The basin is quiet now, silted over, but in its time it was alive, water glistening beneath the sun, wooden boats tied with ropes, cargo being loaded and unloaded. Grain, cotton, cloth, beads, ornaments, all flowed outward. Shells, stones, metals, and exotic goods flowed inward. Here, trade became not only an economic act, but a cultural bridge. Archaeologists have found beads of Indus origin in Mesopotamia, seals from the Indus in distant cities, and ornaments that traveled across lands. The people of Lothal did not conquer foreign lands, but they reached them nonetheless. Their presence carried in the small, durable, beautiful objects they made. In the heart of Lothal, workshops hummed with activity. Bead makers polished carnelian with such skill that their beads are still admired today. Craftsmen worked shell into bangles, copper into tools, ivory into ornaments. Merchants weighed goods on stone balances, marking their ownership with seals carved with animals and symbols. The marketplace was alive with voices, fishermen, farmers, artisans, traders, each part of the rhythm that carried goods from river to sea. Imagine a ship at anchor in Lothal's basin. Its hull is filled with jars of grain, rolls of cotton, cloth, strings of beads. The crew prepares for departure, adjusting sails, securing ropes. Merchants bargain for space aboard, their eyes already turned to the distant horizon. As the tide rises, the ship begins to move, slipping from the basin into open water, bound for shores where different languages are spoken, where the goods of the Indus will become treasures of another world. The dockyard of Lothal is often called one of the earliest known in history. Its presence speaks of vision, of planning, of a people who understood not only the rhythms of rivers, but the rhythms of tides. To carve such a basin, to align it with the flow of water, was to marry engineering with imagination. The people of the Indus did not fear the sea, they embraced it as a path to connection. The trade routes extended far. Mesopotamian texts mention goods from a distant place they called Meluha. Many believe this to be the Indus Valley. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan passed through the Indus on its way west. Copper from Oman may have flowed into Indus workshops. Shells from the Arabian Sea were carved into ornaments, carried inland to cities far from the coast. Each item was not just a good, but a thread weaving the Indus into the great fabric of the ancient world. Yet even here in the hum of trade, the spirit of the Indus shines. There are no signs of conquest, no evidence of war fleets or empires built by the sea. Instead, there is balance, exchange, mutual benefit. The people of Lothal and the wider Indus Valley built their greatness not by taking, but by connecting, not by force, but by craft. As evening falls in Lothal, the dockyard glows in twilight. Ships rest at anchor, their sails furled. Merchants close their stalls. Craftsmen put away their tools. Families return home. The air carries the smell of salt and smoke, the sound of waves against wood. The port quiets, but the rhythm of trade continues, unseen, across the waters. As you drift toward rest, imagine the dockyard filled with water, ships rising with the tide, beads glimmering in the sun, merchants calling in voices that mix with seabirds. Imagine the vast web of connections stretching outward, binding the Indus to distant lands. The port of Lothal whispers across time that even in silence, the Indus Valley was never alone, but always part of the wider world. Among the many sites of the Indus Valley Civilization, some whisper of trade, some of ritual, some of craft, but Dholavira, resting in the dry lands of present-day Gujarat, whispers above all of water, in a place where rain is scarce and rivers are fleeting. The people of Dholavira built a city that seemed to bend nature itself, shaping reservoirs, channels, and tanks to hold life steady. To walk among its ruins today is to feel the ingenuity of a people who listened deeply to the rhythm of water and turned scarcity into survival. Imagine entering Dholavira as it once was. The sun beats down upon white stone, the air dry and warm, the sky an endless expanse of blue. Yet within the city walls, there is order and calm. Great reservoirs, cut from stone, lie in rows, their steps descending toward water. Channels carved with precision guide rain and floodwater into storage, ensuring that every drop was gathered and kept. Wells rise within courtyards, their mouths dark and cool. To live here was to live within a city shaped entirely around the art of water. Unlike Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, built along mighty rivers, Dholavira lay far from constant streams. It demanded another kind of wisdom, not reliance on floods, but mastery of collection and conservation. The city itself was planned as a series of divisions, with citadel, middle town, and lower town all bound together by walls and reservoirs. Life flowed not only through streets, but through channels linking home to well, well to tank, tank to reservoir. The city was a living design of water, One of the most haunting features of Dholavira is its inscriptions. Large stone signs, some of the longest examples of the Indus script, once adorned its walls. Imagine walking into the city and seeing, above a gate, a row of symbols carved and displayed, signs of identity, of welcome, of meaning now beyond our reach. The letters are silent today, but their very presence suggests that here, at Dholavira, writing was not hidden on small seals alone, but displayed openly for all to see, a message, perhaps to visitors, perhaps to the gods, perhaps to the city itself. Inside, workshops hummed with activity. Bead makers polished carnelian and agate, potters fired vessels painted with birds and fish, metalworkers shaped copper into tools and ornaments. Each craft supported the community, each tied to the network of trade that carried Dholavira's goods beyond its walls. And yet, unlike the ports, Dholavira's heart was always water. Without water, the crafts would have fallen silent. The people dispersed. With water, the city thrived. Picture a festival in Dholavira after rains have filled the reservoirs. Families gather at the water's edge, lamps flickering, flowers floating on the surface. Children splash, laughing, as elders give thanks for the gift of rain. Music rises, flutes, drums, voices, carrying into the night. The reservoirs reflect the stars. Water and sky merging in a single shimmer. The city glows, not with monuments to kings, but with gratitude for water, the true ruler of the land over time. Though, even Dholavira could not resist the changes of climate. As monsoons weakened and rivers dried, the reservoirs could no longer be filled. The city shrank, its people moving elsewhere, its inscriptions fading beneath the sun. The stone tanks still stand, empty now, their steps leading downward into silence. To walk there today is to feel both awe and sorrow. At the ingenuity of a civilization that built life from scarcity, sorrow at the silence that followed. And yet, Dholavira's memory endures. Its reservoirs remind us that ancient wisdom was not only about conquest or monuments, but about listening to the land, adapting to its rhythm, shaping survival from its gifts. Its inscriptions remind us that the people sought to speak, to declare themselves in symbols, even if their meaning is lost. Its ruins remind us that civilization can flourish even in harsh places, if guided by care, patience, and respect for nature. As you close your eyes, imagine the reservoirs of Dholavira filled with water, their surfaces glowing in lamplight. Imagine walking down their steps, cool stone beneath your feet, the reflection of stars above you. Imagine the inscriptions above the gates, symbols alive with meaning, greeting you as you enter. In this city of water, the Indus people built a harmony that still whispers across the silence of time. Every civilization lives alongside animals. They are not only companions and sources of labor, but also symbols, spirits, and reflections of human imagination. In the Indus Valley, animals appear everywhere, in seals, in figurines, in pottery. In the very rhythm of life, they plowed the fields, filled the markets, filled the imagination of the people. To understand the Indus is to see the world not only through its bricks and drains, but also through its creatures, both real and mythic. The bull is perhaps the most enduring image. On countless seals, a powerful bull stands with curved horns, steady and dignified. This was no ordinary beast, but a symbol of strength, fertility, and endurance. In the fields, bulls pulled wooden plows, their strength opening the soil for seeds. In the imagination, they stood as guardians, emblems of vitality, creatures that connected earth and spirit. To see the bull on a seal was to recognize both power and protection. Elephants, too, appear in Indus art, massive, calm-wise. They carried an aura of patience and strength. They roamed the forests at the edges of the civilization, perhaps domesticated, perhaps admired from afar. To carve an elephant into a seal was to honor a presence that seemed larger than life, a being of endurance and memory. Even today, elephant remains sacred in South Asia, And perhaps this reverence carries echoes of the Indus. Rhinoceroses appear as well solitary, armored, formidable. To the Indus people, they may have represented protection, resilience, a wild force respected, but not tamed. Tigers, fierce and elusive, were also carved, their stripes suggested in simple lines. These creatures reminded the people that beyond the order of their cities lay a world of wild power, untamed and eternal. There were mythic animals, too. The most famous is the so-called unicorn, a single-horned beast that appears on many seals. Whether it was real, symbolic, or imagined, we cannot know, but it suggests a vision of mystery, of creatures that embodied purity, uniqueness, perhaps even divine presence. To carve a unicorn was to acknowledge that not all life can be explained, that some creatures live only in the imagination. Domesticated animals filled daily life. Cattle gave milk, oxen gave strength, goats and sheep gave wool and meat, dogs guarded homes and flocks, cats prowled grain stores, keeping them free of pests. Chickens, perhaps first domesticated in this region, provided food and companionship. These animals were not only useful, but part of the community, woven into the rhythm of fields, homes, and markets. Imagine a morning in Mohenjo-Daro. The streets are alive with sound, oxen lowing as they are led to fields, goats bleating in courtyards, dogs barking playfully, chickens scattering in dust, children chase calves laughing. Merchants bring carts pulled by bulls laden with grain. Farmers pat their animals with familiarity, speaking softly to them as they begin the day's work. Life hums with creatures, each carrying its role, each part of the whole. The spiritual presence of animals is harder to grasp, yet ever present. The cross-legged figure on some seals, surrounded by animals, suggests a lord of beasts, a mediator between human and creature, perhaps a deity or a mythic ancestor. The bull and the unicorn may have been sacred emblems, woven into ritual. Figurines of birds carefully shaped from clay may have carried symbolic meaning, representing freedom, the sky, or the soul. Animals were also clay toys shaped like bulls with wheels for legs were pulled by children through the streets. Figurines of birds were held in small hands, their forms simple but filled with delight. To a child, the bull was not only sacred or strong, but a friend in clay, a companion in games. Through animals, children learned both joy and respect, both imagination and reality. Picture the fields at dusk. Oxen return slowly, carts creaking. Behind them, dogs run ahead, tails wagging. Birds settle into trees, their calls soft against the fading light. Families gather in courtyards, goats lying at their feet, cats slipping silently by. The bull rests in his pen, steady and calm. In the distance, a tiger may prowl unseen, a reminder that the wild still breathes beyond the edges. The city glows with lamps, but life flows also in fur, horn, wing, and paw. The Indus people remind us that civilization is not only about humans, but about the harmony between human and animal. Their seals show creatures not as decoration, but as emblems, as symbols of what mattered most. Their daily lives show creatures as partners, companions, guardians. Their imagination shows creatures as myth, as mystery, as reflections of spirit. As you close your eyes, imagine the bull strong and steady, the elephant calm and wise, the unicorn glowing with mystery. Imagine the dogs curled by fires, the cats slipping through shadows, the birds wheeling above the river. The Indus Valley may be silent in words, but through its creatures, it speaks still, a soft chorus of life, reminding us that civilization is never human alone, but always shared with the animals of earth and imagination. Civilizations rise where rivers flow, water feeds the fields, carries boats, nourishes bodies, and marks the rhythm of life itself. In the Indus Valley, rivers were more than natural features. They were lifelines, teachers, companions, and perhaps even deities. To live in this civilization was to live within the pulse of water, to measure time not by clocks but by floods, by rains, by the steady sound of rivers moving across the earth. The Indus itself was vast, stretching across plains and carrying silt from distant mountains. It flowed strong, wide, steady, carving its way through land that would otherwise be dry. Along its banks, fields flourished, cities rose, people gathered. The river was not only a giver of water, but a giver of rhythm. Its seasonal floods renewed the soil, its steady current carried boats laden with goods, its wide sweep shaped the map of life. Its tributaries, the Ravi, the Sutlej, the Bees, the Gagarhakra, each played their part. Some flowed strong, others wandered, others faded into silence over centuries. But in the age of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, they formed a web of water, connecting settlements, nourishing fields, guiding life across the plains. Imagine a network of streams and canals, boats drifting softly, farmers watching the waters rise and fall, traders steering goods from village to city. Floods were both blessing and danger. Each year, the rivers swelled, carrying silt that enriched the soil. The people prepared for this, building canals and reservoirs, guiding the waters into their fields. But floods could also overwhelm, sweeping through streets, filling houses, leaving behind layers of silt. Mohenjo-Daro itself shows signs of repeated flooding, its people rebuilding again and again. To live with rivers was to live with patience, to accept both gift and challenge, to bow before water's dual face. Imagine standing on the banks of the Indus at flood season. The waters roar, muddy and swift, carrying branches, soil perhaps, even pieces of distant hills. Families stand watching, measuring the rise, waiting to see if it will bring blessing or harm. Children point at floating logs, elders murmur prayers, farmers look toward their fields with both hope and worry. The river is alive, restless, powerful. In its flow it carries both life and loss. Water was not only practical but sacred. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro suggests that immersion was more than hygiene, it was ritual, purification, renewal. Wells within homes suggest that water was honored daily, drawn with care, perhaps offered before being drunk. Reservoirs at Dholavira remind us that even in arid lands, water was treated as treasure, gathered with reverence, guarded with precision. To the Indus people, water was not only matter but spirit, not only survival but meaning. Festivals may have marked the floods, the rains, the turning of seasons. Families gathering by rivers, offering flowers or grain, singing songs, lighting lamps that floated gently downstream, children laughing as they waded in shallow waters, elders telling stories of great floods, of rivers that shifted, of times when water had blessed or taken. The community did not merely use the river, it lived with it, listened to it, spoke to it. Over centuries, rivers shifted. The Saraswati, once flowing strong, dried or changed course, leaving settlements stranded, their wells shallow, their fields barren. Imagine the sorrow of a family forced to leave their home, their river gone, the sound of flowing water replaced by silence. They walk away with cattle, carts, pots, and memory, seeking another stream, another lifeline. The loss of rivers may have been the beginning of the civilization's decline, the fading of its voice. And yet, the rivers endure. The Indus still flows, winding through lands where millions live today. Farmers still bend over its fields, cattle still drink at its banks, children still play in its shallows. The same water that once touched Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro touches lives now, a continuous thread of memory. The river does not forget even if people do. As you rest now, imagine the sound of flowing water. Imagine rivers shimmering in moonlight, canals carrying boats, floods spreading across fields. Imagine wells glowing in courtyards, reservoirs filled with rain, lamps floating downstream on festival nights. The Indus Valley may be silent in words, but in water it speaks still, a soft, endless whisper, the voice of time itself. When we imagine ancient civilizations, we often see farmers in fields, merchants in markets, craftsmen at their tools, and priests at their rituals. Yet life is not only work or worship. It is also laughter, rest, and play. The Indus Valley, though silent in words, has left behind small, tender fragments that remind us of this truth, that its people, like us, sought joy, amusement, and moments of leisure. Among the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, archaeologists have found toys, simple, charming, made of clay or wood, tiny carts with wheels that turn, pull along with string, figurines of bulls, birds, and people, shaped with care but also with playfulness, rattles filled with beads, their sound delightful to small children, whistles shaped like birds, their calls echoing through courtyards, dice carved from stone cubes with marks upon their faces, suggesting games of chance or skill. Imagine a child in Harappa crouched in the dust of a courtyard. Before them lies a clay bull, its horns curved, its wheels rolling smoothly as the child pulls it with a cord. They laugh, chasing it across the yard, their siblings joining with their own toys. In the distance, their parents work, weaving, grinding grain, shaping pots. But here in this moment, the children's world is full of play. The bull is not just a toy. It is a symbol of strength and spirit, brought into the child's imagination, in clay and motion. Games were not only for children. The discovery of dice suggests that adults, too, sought amusement. Perhaps they played in courtyards at night, gathered around lamps, tossing dice onto the ground, laughing, wagering shells or beads. Games may have carried both chance and ritual, both amusement and meaning, the roll of a cube, the mark of fate, the thrill of play, all whisper of human hearts that sought delight in the turn of chance. There are boards carved with grids, patterns that hint at games of strategy. We cannot know the rules, but we can imagine players leaning forward, moving small stones across lines, trying to outwit one another, smiling in victory, laughing in defeat. These games were echoes of the same desire we carry today, to turn leisure into story, to turn time into play. Even toys carried lessons. A child playing with a wheeled cart learned of movement, of animals, of trade. A rattle taught rhythm, a whistle taught sound. Figurines taught stories, myths, the presence of animals, sacred and ordinary. Play was education, but without burden, joy, teaching knowledge in the softest way. Imagine an evening in Mohenjo-Daro. Families sit in courtyards, the day's work behind them. Children chase clay animals across the dust, their laughter rising into the warm air. Elders watch with fond smiles, remembering their own childhood games. In one corner, a group of young men toss dice, cheering at the throws, clapping each other's shoulders. A flute plays softly, blending with laughter, blending with the hum of night. The city breathes not only with work, but with joy. Leisure extended beyond toys and games. Music, too, was part of their lives. Small drums, flutes, and rattles have been found, suggesting songs and rhythms that once echoed through streets and festivals. Dance, too, must have filled their gatherings. The famous bronze dancing girl, with her confident stance and graceful form, is more than ornament. She is memory of rhythm, of music, of movement woven into daily life. Animals may have been part of play as well. Children racing goats, flying birds, watching dogs leap through courtyards, cats chasing shadows, calves bounding clumsily through fields. The presence of creatures added joy, companionship, and laughter to life. What strikes us most is the tenderness of these discoveries. The toys are not monumental, not designed to endure. Yet they survived. They remind us that behind the great walls and drains, behind the silent script and trade routes, there were children who laughed, adults who played, families who rested together. Civilization is not only bricks and systems, it is the quiet joy of play that binds hearts together. As you close your eyes, imagine the sound of dice rolling on stone, the squeak of a clay cart's wheels, the whistle of a bird-shaped toy. Imagine children laughing in the fading light, families gathered in calm, music drifting on the air. The Indus Valley, though silent now, once hummed not only with work, but with joy. And in that joy, its people were fully human, as we are still. Civilizations are not sustained only by walls and fields, but also by care, the ways people tend to the body, to illness, to the fragility of life. Though the Indus Valley left no written medical texts, no carved instructions of remedies, its ruins whisper of health and healing in subtle ways, in its baths, its drains, its tools, its traditions. Through these fragments, we glimpse a people who valued not only survival, but well-being, who sought cleanliness, balance, and the quiet art of healing. One of the most striking features of Indus cities is their attention to water. Wells dotted neighborhoods, ensuring access to clean supplies. Drains ran beneath streets, carrying waste away. Bathing areas were built into homes, their floors sloped to channel water outward. At Mohenjo-Daro, the Great Bath suggests purification, not only spiritual but perhaps hygienic. In a world where disease could spread unseen, the Indus people seemed to understand that cleanliness was life, that water was healing. Imagine a morning in Mohenjo-Daro. A family gathers in their courtyard, drawing water from their well. The mother pours it over her child, washing away the dust of the night. The father splashes his face, cool and refreshed. The drain carries the water away, leaving the courtyard clean. In such simple acts lies the foundation of health, not grand cures, but daily care, quiet, steady, enduring. Archaeological finds hint at medical knowledge. Tiny tools, some of copper and bronze, may have been used for surgery, or at least for treating wounds. Evidence suggests that dentistry was practiced. A drilled molar, thousands of years old, carries the marks of human hands attempting to relieve pain. Imagine the courage of the first person to sit before a healer with a tool, the trust placed in skill and steady hand. In that moment, medicine was not only science but faith. The faith that pain could be eased, life restored. Plants, too, must have played their role. Though no texts survive, it is easy to imagine healers gathering herbs, leaves, roots, and seeds, boiling them into teas, crushing them into poultices, mixing them into oils. The land itself offered remedies, if one knew where to look, if one listened with patience. A bitter root to ease fever, a fragrant flower to calm the mind, a soothing oil to heal wounds. The healer's art was not in invention, but in listening. Listening to plants, to bodies, to the quiet rhythm of life. Health was also shaped by balance. Figurines and yoga-like postures hint at traditions of bodily awareness, of discipline, of harmony between breath and form. Whether these were religious or practical, they suggest a people attentive not only to the body's needs, but to its potential, its flow of energy. To sit cross-legged, to breathe deeply, to move with intention. These acts may have been seeds of practices that echo into the present. Illness, of course, was never absent. Floods could spread disease, drought could bring hunger, wounds could fester, but the care of family, of community, softened the weight. Imagine a healer arriving at a home carrying a pouch of herbs, a small copper tool, a clay vessel of oil. The patient lies on a mat, family gathered nearby. The healer speaks softly, mixes remedies, applies hands with patience. Outside, the river flows, indifferent yet eternal. Inside, the rhythm of healing is intimate, human, filled with quiet dignity. Death, too, was part of life, and the care of the dead speaks of respect for health even in its end. The Indus people buried their dead with modesty, ornaments, pottery, small offerings. No massive tombs, no towering monuments, but quiet graves that speak of continuity, of memory, of care. To tend to the dead was also to tend to the living, to remind the community that life flows onward even as one body rests. The Indus Valley may not have written its medicine in stone, but its cities speak of it nonetheless. Clean water, structured drains, spaces for bathing, tools for healing, signs of bodily discipline, all remind us that health was central to life. It was not a luxury, but a rhythm woven into every day, as vital as grain, as constant as water. As night falls, imagine a healer's workshop glowing in lamplight, shelves lined with clay jars of herbs, tools glinting faintly, a bowl of water reflecting the flame. The healer sits quietly, grinding seeds into powder, listening to the hum of the city outside. In that stillness lies the art of care, not loud, not grand, but steady, patient, enduring. As you rest tonight, let this image soothe you. The cool water of a well, the gentle hand of a healer, the calm breath of someone in balance. The Indus Valley, though silent, still whispers of health, of bodies cared for, of pain eased, of lives lived with dignity. Every civilization must face the question of death. How we care for the dead speaks of how we understand life, how we honor the body, how we imagine what lies beyond. The Indus Valley Civilization, though silent in words, reveals through its burials and offerings a gentle philosophy, one of modesty, of care, of continuity, rather than grandeur or fear. Unlike Egypt with its pyramids, unlike Mesopotamia with its ziggurats, the Indus people did not build monumental tombs. Their dead were laid in simple graves, most often in extended positions, sometimes in urns, sometimes with modest offerings of pottery, ornaments, and food. There is no evidence of kings entombed with treasures, no chambers sealed with curses, no elaborate claims to immortality. Instead, the burials whisper of equality, of families resting together, of lives honored in quiet ways. Imagine a burial in Harappa. The community gathers in a small space beyond the city, where graves are dug into soft earth. The body, washed and wrapped in cloth, is carried gently by family. It is lowered into the grave, laid upon its back, facing a sky filled with sun or stars. Beside it, a pot of grain, a small ornament, perhaps a toy for a child, perhaps a bead of carnelian for an elder. These are not riches, but tokens, reminders of life, gifts for the journey beyond. The earth is filled and the mound smooth. A family kneels, placing flowers, whispering words we can never hear. The grave is simple, modest, unmarked by towering stones, yet in its simplicity lies dignity. The dignity of a people who saw death not as spectacle, but as part of life's rhythm. Some burials were urns, ashes gathered into clay vessels, placed with care. Fire may have played a role in ritual, purifying the body, releasing the spirit. At Calibangan, fire altars suggest ceremonies where flames rose into the night, carrying prayers and offerings. Perhaps the burning of grain, of oil, of the body itself was seen as a passage from matter to spirit, from earth to sky. The presence of grave goods, though modest, suggests belief in something beyond. Why place food, ornaments, or toys with the dead, unless one imagined they would need them? Perhaps they believed the soul traveled onward, carrying with it memory, needing nourishment, accompanied by the tokens of love. Perhaps they believed the dead became ancestors, guardians of the living, honored through offerings and remembrance. There is no sign of fear in these burials, no attempt to overwhelm death with grandeur. Instead, there is calm acceptance, continuity. The graves suggest that the dead remain part of the community, resting near the living, remembered in daily life. Death was not separation, but transformation. Imagine a twilight ritual. The family gathers at the grave, lamps glowing softly. They place flowers, pour water, scatter grain upon the earth. Children watch silently, learning through gesture that to honor the dead is to love the living. The river flows nearby, carrying reflections of the stars, carrying memory into eternity. The air is quiet, reverent, filled not with fear, but with gentle acceptance. The Indus Valley's death practices remind us that civilization is not measured by monuments of stone, but by the tenderness with which we care for one another in life and beyond. Their modest graves speak more than pyramids. They tell us of people who lived without kings, who died without spectacle, who found meaning in simplicity, balance, and love. As you rest tonight, imagine the quiet of those ancient cemeteries. The soft earth above the graves, the flowers left by family, the whispers of prayers lost to time. Imagine the calm of acceptance, the dignity of simplicity, the peace of a civilization that honored death as part of life's eternal flow. Civilizations are not only bricks, drains, or trade routes. At their heart are people living together, families, neighbors, and communities bound by care, by custom, by quiet rhythms of daily life. In the Indus Valley, though silent in words, the fragments left behind, houses, figurines, ornaments, and graves, whisper of how men, women, and children lived together, how society flowed in balance, and how roles were shaped not by conquest, but by cooperation. The houses themselves tell us much. Built in rows along straight streets, they were not divided into palaces for kings and huts for commoners. Instead, homes were similar in form, whether large or small: brick walls, courtyards, staircases, bathing areas, wells. This uniformity suggests a society less divided by sharp hierarchies, more balanced, more equal in daily life. The absence of grand palaces hints that families themselves, rather than rulers, were the true centers of life. Inside these homes, daily rhythms unfolded. Women likely tended hearths, baking bread, cooking stews of lentils and grain, grinding flour on stone querns. They cared for children, mended cloth, and perhaps joined in crafts like weaving and pottery. Men farmed, traded, worked in workshops, guided oxen through fields. Yet the lines may not have been rigid. In communities shaped by cooperation, roles were shared. With family members working side by side, children were not forgotten. The toys found in Mohenjo-Daro, play carts with wheels, figurines of animals, dice, rattles, remind us that childhood was treasured, that play was seen as part of life, not a distraction. To craft toys with such care is to acknowledge the joy of children, the importance of their laughter. The family circle was not only about labor, but about nurturing joy. Figurines found across the Indus suggest reverence for fertility and motherhood. Many show women with wide hips, adorned with ornaments, perhaps symbols of life-giving power. Whether these were religious icons or household charms, they reveal a society that honored women not only as individuals, but as bearers of life, as keepers of continuity. The balance between genders may have been more even than in later cultures that placed power firmly in male hands. Adornment was part of social life. Beads, bangles, and ornaments were worn by both men and women, found in graves of all ages. Shell bangles, stone beads, faience pendants. These were not mere luxuries, but everyday expressions of beauty, identity, and belonging. To wear beads was to carry a piece of craft, a sign of community, a thread that connected one to others. Community extended beyond family into neighborhoods. Wells were shared, drains maintained together, streets kept orderly. Granaries stored food for many, not just for one. Festivals may have drawn entire cities into shared celebration, music, dance, offerings, and feasts. Life was not lived in isolation, but in circles that widened, from family to neighborhood, from neighborhood to city, from city to the web of the Indus itself. Imagine an evening in Harappa. Families sit in their courtyards, lamps glowing softly. Women braid hair, men repair tools, children play with play toys. Neighbors call to one another across streets, sharing food, laughter, and stories. A flute plays somewhere in the distance, joined by a drum. The air hums not with power or conquest, but with connection, with the small acts that sustain life. In death, too, family remains central. Graves often contain modest offerings, beads, ornaments, food, placed with care, suggesting that even in silence, the bonds of love endured. Death did not sever family, but extended it into memory, into continuity, into the whispers of ancestors. The Indus Valley's social life was not marked by empires or kings, but by circles of family and community. It reminds us that greatness need not be loud. Civilization can be measured not by conquest, but by care, not by monuments, but by meals shared in courtyards, by children's laughter in streets, by neighbors drawing water from the same well. As you rest tonight, imagine that circle, the family around the hearth, the neighbors at the well, the community gathered for a festival beneath the stars. Imagine the balance of men and women, the laughter of children, the quiet dignity of elders. The Indus Valley may be silent in text, but through its families, it speaks still a song of care, cooperation, and the gentle strength of community. Civilization is more than survival. It is also the impulse to create beauty, to give form to joy, to turn rhythm into art. Though the Indus Valley left us no written songs, no carved poems, no painted murals on vast walls, it left us fragments, that whisper of its cultural life, a tiny bronze figure, a handful of instruments, ornaments polished with care. These speak of music, dance, and art woven quietly into daily life. The most famous of these is the bronze dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro. She is small, no taller than a hand, yet alive with presence. Her stance is confident, one hand on her hip, the other hanging loose, her head tilted with poise. On her neck are bangles, countless rings circling her arms. Though she is silent, she seems to move, to breathe, to dance even now. To hold her image is to feel the pulse of music that once filled the city, the beat of drums, the sway of rhythm in a courtyard filled with life. Imagine a festival evening in Harappa. The streets glow with oil lamps, families gather in open spaces, musicians sit with drums carved from clay and wood, their hands beating softly, steadily. A flute joins, its notes rising into the air like birds at dawn. Rattles shake in rhythm, whistles echo playfully, children clap their hands, elders nod in time. The city itself breathing with music, and then the dancers step forward, their bodies adorned with beads and bangles, their movements fluid, alive, graceful. In that moment, the Indus Valley is not only a place of order, but of joy, of art, of beauty expressed in motion. Ornaments reveal another layer of art, beads polished until they glowed like fire, bangles carved from shell, pendants shaped from stone. These were not only decorations, but expressions of identity, of creativity. Men and women alike wore them, carrying beauty into daily life, into ritual, into trade. Imagine a young woman adjusting her bangles before joining a festival. There, clink like soft bells. Imagine a merchant polishing a bead before offering it in exchange, proud of its perfection. These ornaments, though small, carry the weight of culture, of art lived in every gesture. Clay figurines add to the picture. Some show women with elaborate hairstyles. Others show animals with playful details. They may have been toys, charms, or symbols, but they reveal imagination, the urge to shape the world in miniature, to capture life in form. To craft a figurine is to see beauty in the everyday, to make permanence of fleeting shapes. Music, too, lingers in fragments. Small flutes carved from bone, drums made of clay, rattles filled with beads. Their voices are silent now, but we can imagine their sound, the deep thrum of drums in courtyards, the high whistle of flutes at festivals, the steady beat of rattles. In children's hands, music was likely part of ritual, of celebration, of rest. It may have accompanied dance, work, or worship. It was the unseen thread that bound community in rhythm. Art was also in design. Pottery painted with birds and fish, seals carved with intricate animals, patterns etched into beads and bangles. Each carried both function and beauty, each a reminder that art need not be grand to endure. The Indus people wove beauty into the small things, the daily things, making art not a separate sphere but part of life itself. Imagine an artisan's courtyard at dusk. The potter paints delicate lines onto a vessel, his brush steady in lamplight. A bead maker strings ornaments, their colors glowing in the last rays of sun. Children play nearby, humming softly. From another house comes the faint sound of flute and drum. The air is warm, alive, filled with the hum of art, not monumental, not loud, but quiet, steady, enduring. The Indus Valley's art speaks of a culture that valued balance and beauty, not spectacle. It reminds us that civilization, not only pyramids or ziggurats, but also bangles on a wrist, music in a courtyard, dance beneath the stars. Its silence is not emptiness, but gentleness, a civilization that expressed itself in small, human ways, weaving beauty into the rhythm of life. As you drift into rest, imagine the sound of drums in the night, the sway of dancers in lamplight, the gleam of beads in the fire's glow. Imagine the dancing girl standing still yet alive, her presence eternal. The Indus Valley may be silent now, but in its art, its music, its ornaments, it speaks still softly, beautifully, across time. Civilizations rarely emerge with sudden grandeur. They grow slowly like seeds taking root, spreading leaves, reaching upward over generations. So that was with the Indus Valley. From scattered villages along the rivers, patterns of life grew more intricate, more connected, until the settlements became cities, cities so carefully planned, so quietly sophisticated, that even now they inspire awe. Imagine approaching Harappa as it once was. From a distance, you would see walls of brick rising against the horizon, not crude, not haphazard, but formed from thousands of baked bricks, each uniform, each carefully placed. Within those walls stretched streets laid out in straight lines, forming a grid. This was not a city that grew by chance, but one that had been envisioned, designed, shaped by minds that thought not only of the present, but of the future. Mohenjo-Daro rose with similar grace. Its name today means Mound of the Dead, but once it was alive, a city humming with thousands of souls. Imagine walking through its streets, wide avenues lined with houses, side alleys branching like veins, leading to courtyards, wells, and workshops. The houses were not chaotic huts, but multi-roomed dwellings with courtyards, staircases, and even private bathing areas. The people who lived here valued order, privacy, cleanliness, a vision far ahead of their time. One of the most remarkable features of these cities was their water system. Along the streets, drains ran covered and organized, carrying waste away, ensuring cleanliness. Wells dotted the neighborhoods, providing fresh water. In some homes, bathing rooms were built with sloped floors, directing water into drains. Imagine, thousands of years ago, stepping into a city where water was managed so carefully that even many later civilizations could not match it. Markets bustled with trade. In shaded courtyards, merchants displayed beads of carnelian, ornaments of shell, tools of bronze, pottery painted with delicate patterns. Traders from distant lands arrived with goods, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from Persia, perhaps even whispers of contact with Mesopotamia. The Indus cities were not isolated. They were nodes in a vast web of exchange, connected by rivers and caravans to lands beyond. And yet, what is most striking is not only their sophistication, but their silence. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, we find no grand monuments to kings, no statues of rulers towering over their people. The cities of the Indus seem to have thrived without the visible dominance of a single monarch. Authority was expressed not in palaces or temples, but in the shared order of streets, in the uniformity of bricks, in the quiet dignity of communal life. It is a mystery. How could such vast cities exist without leaving behind names of kings or records of conquests? Perhaps the Indus people built their civilization upon cooperation rather than domination, upon balance rather than ambition. As evening falls in Mohenjo-Daro, picture the city alive with gentle sound. The streets grow quiet as families gather in their homes. Fires glow within courtyards, bread bakes in ovens, children play with clay figurines of animals and carts. From workshops comes the faint clink of tools. The river flows steadily nearby, its waters carrying the reflection of stars. The city is alive, not with noise, but with rhythm, the rhythm of life carefully planned, carefully shared. Even today, Walking among the ruins, one can feel it. The walls, though broken, still stand in order. The streets, though silent still, align with precision. Wells remain where they once gave water, as though waiting to be used again. The ghost of a civilization lingers, quiet but undeniable. The rise of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reminds us that greatness does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, patiently, steadily, through bricks, through dreams, through the order of streets. The people of the Indus Valley may not have carved their rulers into stone, but they built cities that outlasted memory itself. As you drift deeper into this story, imagine yourself wandering their streets, the warm bricks beneath your feet, the soft hum of voices around you, the quiet certainty of a people who lived in balance with their river and with one another. The Indus Valley breathes still, and in its breath, we hear the gentle rise of cities from villages, of order from earth, of life from silence. When we speak of civilizations, we often measure them by their words. The Mesopotamians carved cuneiform into clay tablets, leaving behind records of kings, merchants, and myth. The Egyptians inscribed hieroglyphs upon temples and papyrus, filling history with their gods and rulers. The Chinese etched characters onto bones and bronze, their meanings flowing forward through thousands of years. But the Indus Valley, though vast and sophisticated, remains strangely silent. Its script survives in fragments, carved into seals, etched upon pottery, marked upon tablets no larger than the palm of a hand, and yet no one alive today can read it. The words of the Indus people remain locked, like whispers behind a closed door. Imagine holding one of these seals in your hand. It is small, carved from steatite, smooth and cool to the touch. On one side, a figure of an animal, a bull perhaps, or an elephant, or a creature with horns that seems part real, part myth. Above the figure, a row of symbols, short strokes, circles, loops, geometric shapes. The arrangement looks purposeful, like writing, but the meaning is lost. Did it name the owner? Did it mark goods for trade? Did it carry a prayer, a myth, a story? No one knows. For more than a century, scholars have tried to unlock this script. Some compare it to Mesopotamian cuneiform, others to early Dravidian languages, others to symbols found in Central Asia. Computers have analyzed the patterns, noting that the sequence of signs resembles language, not random marks, and yet the code remains unbroken. The Indus script is one of history's great enigmas, a writing system visible, but unreadable. The silence is haunting. If we could read these signs, perhaps we would know the names of Indus rulers. Or perhaps discover there were no rulers at all. We might read their laws, their hymns, their records of trade. We might learn of their gods, their myths, their view of life and death. But as it stands, all we can do is imagine. The people of the Indus remain voiceless in history, their words carved but unspeaking. This silence shapes how we see them. Other civilizations are remembered by their victories and conquests because their words boast of them. The Indus Valley, with no deciphered text, is remembered instead by its order, its bricks, its drains. It is as though the people themselves wanted to leave behind not names, but patterns. Or perhaps they left their words, but time conspired to erase their sound. Picture a scribe of the Indus Valley, seated at a low table in a workshop. Before him lies a soft stone. With careful hands, he carves tiny symbols, precise and deliberate. He pauses, considers, adds a final mark. The seal is finished, ready to be pressed into clay, ready to travel with merchants, ready to carry meaning across the land. To him, the symbols are alive, filled with significance. To us, they are silent shapes, frozen in time. Some say the script was never a language at all, but a system of symbols, shorthand for trade or ritual. Others insist it must have been spoken, that behind each mark lay words and sounds, grammar and poetry. The truth remains hidden. Until it is deciphered, the Indus people remain both present and absent, visible in their cities, invisible in their voices. And yet, there is beauty in the mystery. To sit with the seals is to sit with silence, to remember that history does not always reveal itself. Sometimes it asks us to imagine, to wonder, to dream of what cannot be known. Perhaps the Indus script is not meant to be solved quickly. Perhaps it is a gift to patience, to quiet curiosity, to the slow rhythm of time. As you rest, imagine the seals glowing softly in firelight. Imagine rows of symbols stretching before you, like stars in a night sky, each carrying meaning beyond reach. Let the silence of the script lull you into calm, a reminder that not all questions need answers, that some mysteries are best left as gentle whispers across the centuries. Civilizations are often remembered for their monuments, for their rulers, for the great events that define them. Yet beneath all that lies something more enduring, the quiet flow of daily life. The Indus Valley, though silent in texts, leaks clearly through the traces of its homes, its tools, its pottery, its streets. From these fragments, we can begin to imagine the ordinary lives of extraordinary people. Picture a street in Mohenjo-Daro on a bright morning. The air is warm but fresh, the sky pale blue above the flat roofs of houses. The street is straight, paved with brick, lined on either side with walls of sun-dried clay and baked brick. Doors open into courtyards where families begin their day. Smoke rises gently from hearths, the smell of bread baking mingling with the earthy scent of damp clay. Children laugh as they run to fetch water from a nearby well. Cattle low softly in pens. Goats bleat, chickens scatter as people move about their tasks. The homes of the Indus people were carefully built. Many had multiple rooms arranged around an open courtyard. Some were 2 stories tall, with staircases climbing upward, suggesting families valued space, privacy, and comfort. Floors were often plastered smooth, and in some houses, bathing areas were constructed with drains to carry away water. Small details that tell of a people attentive to cleanliness and order. The rhythm of daily life followed the cycles of the river and the seasons. Farmers tilled fields beyond the city walls, planting wheat, barley, peas, and sesame. They raised cattle, sheep, and goats, relying on the fertile floodplains of the Indus to provide steady harvests. Fishermen cast nets into the river, bringing back fish that glistened in the sunlight. In gardens, people grew dates, melons, and perhaps cotton, among the earliest cultivated in the world. Food was simple yet nourishing. Bread baked from wheat, porridge from barley, lentils stewed with spices, milk from cattle, butter churned in clay pots, honey gathered from wild hives. In the evenings, families gathered to eat together, seated on mats, the meal shared from communal bowls. The taste of grain and spice, the warmth of firelight, the hum of voices, this was the texture of their lives. Craftsmen shaped beauty from the materials around them. In workshops, potters spun clay into graceful vessels, their surfaces painted with geometric designs or images of birds and animals. Beadmakers polished carnelian, shell, and faience into ornaments of striking beauty. Metalworkers forged tools of copper and bronze, shaping blades, chisels, and ornaments. Weavers spun cotton into cloth, dyed it with natural colors, and stitched garments that carried patterns both practical and symbolic. Children played with toys of clay, miniature carts with wheels that turned, figurines of animals, marbles, rattles. Their laughter echoed through courtyards and streets, reminders that even in ancient times, the joy of play was universal. Women tended homes, baked bread, cared for children, and often took part in crafts, weaving, and pottery. Men farmed, traded, built, but roles may have been shared more fluidly than we often assume, for the Indus Valley seems to have thrived on cooperation rather than rigid hierarchy. Evenings brought calm. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, fires were lit, lamps of oil flickered in courtyards, and the hum of the city softened. Perhaps families sang songs together, or listened to stories told by elders. Drums beat softly, flutes played gentle melodies, The stars wheeled overhead, the same constellations that guided their planting and travel, the same stars we see now, shining on lives that once filled the valley with light. There was no grandeur of temples towering over the city, no statues of kings demanding worship. Instead, the sacred seems to have been woven into daily life. Small figurines of mother goddesses suggest reverence for fertility and earth. Seals with horned animals suggest myths, and symbols tied to nature, ritual baths, and fire altars. Found in some places suggest that purification and ceremony were part of ordinary rhythms. The sacred was not apart from life, it was life itself, flowing in water, in harvest, in hearth and home. Imagine walking through Mohenjo-Daro at dusk. The streets glow faintly with the light of oil lamps. Families sit together in courtyards, eating their evening meal. Children grow quiet, drifting towards sleep. The air hums softly with the sound of distant drums, of cattle settling, of the river flowing steadily nearby. You walk slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the calm of a civilization, at peace with itself. This was the Indus Valley, not defined by war or conquest, but by the gentle persistence of daily life. And as you close your eyes tonight, you can almost feel it. The warm bricks beneath your feet, the smell of bread baking, the sound of water drawn from a well, the glow of firelight in a home where family gathers. The Indus people lived, not as rulers and warriors, but as families, neighbors, and communities. Their greatness found in the quiet rhythm of life itself. Civilizations do not live by bread alone. They grow by reaching outward, by exchanging not only goods but ideas, by weaving themselves into networks larger than themselves. The Indus Valley, though quiet in its ruins and silent in its script, was no isolated world. Its rivers and roads carried trade far beyond its fields, linking its people to distant lands, connecting them in ways that still astonish. Imagine the river as a great highway. Boats carved from wood glide steadily across its waters, laden with grain, pottery, cotton cloth, beads, and tools. The sun glints upon the ripples, the oars dip rhythmically. Merchants speak softly of their cargo. From village to city, from city to neighboring lands, the river carried life outward, binding communities into one. Archaeologists have found seals from the Indus Valley in Mesopotamia, hundreds of miles away. These tiny artifacts, carved with animals and undeciphered script, tell us that Indus merchants traveled far, or that their goods traveled on their behalf. Imagine the bustling ports along the Persian Gulf, where traders from Sumer and Akkad examined carnelian beads, cotton fabrics, and exotic shells brought from the Indus. They may have asked with curiosity about the distant land where such treasures were made. And so, even without written stories, the Indus spoke across the sea. On land, caravans wound their way across deserts and mountains. Oxen pulled carts laden with jars of grain, copper tools, woven cloth. Traders walked beside their animals, resting beneath trees, lighting fires at night beneath the stars. From the highlands came lapis lazuli, turquoise, and precious stones, carried down to Indus cities, polished by artisans, traded onward to distant lands. From coastal waters came shells, shaped into ornaments, gleaming softly in firelight. The Indus Valley was both giver and receiver, sending its goods outward, drawing in treasures from afar. Picture the market in Mohenjo-Daro at midday. The streets are crowded with merchants, their stalls filled with goods. Potters display vessels, painted with patterns of birds and fish. Bead makers show strings of carnelian, agate, and shell, each polished to perfection. Weavers offer rolls of cotton cloth, dyed in colors drawn from plants and earth. Farmers bring baskets of dates, melons, and grain. The air hums with voices, the calls of traders, the laughter of children darting between stalls. Somewhere, a musician plays a flute, its notes weaving through the noise. It is not chaos, but harmony. A marketplace alive with exchange, a city alive with connection. The goods of the Indus carried not only material value, but cultural meaning. To wear a carnelian bead was to carry a piece of distant lands. To trade cotton cloth was to spread the innovation of weaving to places where it had not yet been known. To share pottery patterns was to share symbols and stories, even if their meanings are lost to us now. Trade was not merely commerce. It was memory. It was culture. It was the weaving together of human experience. Some scholars suggest that the Indus merchants even traveled by sea as far as Oman and Bahrain, carrying their goods across the Arabian Sea. Imagine the ships, sturdy and low, their sails catching the wind, their hulls filled with cargo. The waves rise and fall, the horizon stretches endlessly. But the merchants are steady. They know the stars, they know the winds, they know that beyond the sea lies another market, another world eager for their goods. And yet, through all this vast network, the Indus people left no records of kings or conquerors. Their trade was not marked by the banners of empire, but by the quiet persistence of merchants, by the patient labor of craftsmen, by the steady flow of rivers and caravans. They did not seek to dominate, but to connect. Their greatness was not in conquest, but in exchange. As evening falls, the marketplace grows quiet. Merchants pack their goods, families return home, fires are lit. The air carries the smell of spices and grain, the soft sound of carts creaking, the low murmur of voices far away. Ships rest at anchor, their sails furled, their cargo safe. Caravans settle by the roadside, their fires glowing beneath the stars. The web of trade rests for the night, but its threads remain, binding the Indus Valley to a world far larger than itself. As you drift into sleep, imagine those rivers of trade, those roads of connection. Imagine boats gliding silently across starlit waters, caravans glowing faintly beneath desert skies, markets alive with laughter and color. The Indus Valley may be forgotten in words, but in its trade, it once touched the world, and its whispers linger still. When we think of ancient civilizations, we usually think of rulers, the pharaohs of Egypt with their pyramids rising to the sky, the kings of Mesopotamia carving their names into clay tablets and boasting of their victories, the emperors of China, commanding armies and building walls to mark their power. History, as we are taught, is often the history of rulers, but the Indus Valley is different. In the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, no palaces have been found. No statues of kings loom above the people. No tombs filled with treasures declare the names of rulers. Instead, we find houses, simple, uniform, practical. We find walls and dreams, planned streets and granaries. We find order, but not dominance. It is as though the Indus people built a civilization without kings, without empires, without monuments to individual power. This is one of the greatest mysteries of their world. How could such vast, sophisticated cities exist without rulers we can name? Imagine walking through Mohenjo-Daro at its height. The streets are wide and orderly, the houses built with bricks of identical size. Wells are shared among neighbors, drains carry waste away from homes, public spaces serve entire communities. Everything suggests careful planning, a collective vision of order. Yet nowhere do we see the signature of a ruler demanding recognition. Instead, the city seems to have been built for the people, not for the glorification of one. Perhaps the Indus Valley was governed by councils, groups of elders, or assemblies of merchants and farmers. Perhaps decisions were made communally, with an emphasis on balance rather than hierarchy. Perhaps power was dispersed, flowing like the river itself, shared among many instead of concentrated in one. The granaries offer a clue. Large, carefully built, they suggest that food was collected and stored for the community, not hoarded for kings. Their presence hints at organization, but not necessarily domination. They speak of a system where resources were shared, where stability mattered more than grandeur. The seals, too, offer whispers. Many show animals and symbols, but none show kings in triumph. There are no inscriptions boasting of battles won, No depictions of rulers seated on thrones. Instead, the symbols seem to carry meaning tied to trade, to ritual, to shared culture. The absence of kings is not a gap, it is a presence. The presence of another way of organizing life. Imagine a council gathering at dusk in Harappa. Elders sit together in a shaded courtyard. Merchants bring their concerns. Farmers speak of floods and harvests. Artisans discuss their needs. Decisions are made slowly, thoughtfully, not to serve the pride of a ruler, but to preserve the balance of the community around them. The city hums with life, families cooking, children playing, craftsmen working. Governance is not a spectacle, but a quiet rhythm woven into daily life. The Indus Valley may have been a civilization of balance, not the balance of armies and conquest, but the balance of water, trade, and cooperation. In its silence, it offers us an image of a world where people built not for kings, but for themselves, where order rose not from domination, but from shared vision. As night falls over Mohenjo-Daro, lamps glow in homes, fires flicker in courtyards, and the city rests. No palace dominates the skyline, no statue casts a shadow over the people. Instead, the streets themselves, the wells, the drains, the houses, these are the monuments of the Indus. Monuments not to rulers, but to community. As you close your eyes, imagine this civilization without kings. Imagine cities built not for glory, but for life. Imagine people living in balance, guided not by crowns, but by the quiet cooperation of many. The Indus Valley reminds us that power does not always need a throne. Sometimes it can flow gently, like the river, nourishing all it touches. Civilizations are not only built from bricks and trade, they are also built from beliefs, the unseen threads that weave meaning into daily life, even when texts are lost. Even when languages remain undeciphered, the sacred often survives in symbols, in rituals, in the quiet arrangements of space. The Indus Valley, though silent in words, whispers to us still of a spiritual life woven gently into the rhythm of its people. Imagine walking through Mohenjo-Daro at dawn. The streets are quiet, the air cool, the first rays of sunlight glinting on the brick walls. In a courtyard, a woman lights a small fire, offering grains into the flames. Across the city, others pour water into clay vessels, raise their hands toward the sky, or place flowers by a household altar. These small acts, repeated daily, remind us that the sacred was not separate from life, but part of its fabric. One of the most mysterious structures in Mohenjo-Daro is the Great Bath, built with baked bricks, lined with bitumen to hold water, and equipped with steps descending into its depths. It suggests ritual. Perhaps people bathed here not only for cleanliness, but for purification, for renewal, for connection to something greater. The still water would have reflected the sky, the bodies of those who entered, the flicker of lamps. To step into the great bath was to step into mystery, into a ritual that has no surviving words but speaks through stone. Seals found across the Indus carry images that hint at belief. One shows a figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals, a posture that some see as a prototype of later yoga, a lord of beasts, a master of nature. Others show sacred animals, bulls with curved horns, elephants, tigers, perhaps even mythic creatures blending features of many. These may have been totems, symbols of clans, or representations of gods. We cannot know for certain, but they tell us that the people saw power and meaning in the living world around them. The figurines, too, whisper of devotion. Small clay figures of women, with exaggerated hips and breasts, suggest reverence for fertility, for the mystery of life itself. Perhaps they represented a mother goddess, or perhaps they were household charms kept to ensure harvests, children, and continuity. In either case, they reveal a people attuned to the cycles of birth and renewal, honoring the sacred woven into the body and the earth. Fire altars have been uncovered at sites like Kalibangan, their arrangements suggesting rituals performed in open courtyards. flames rising, smoke drifting into the sky. Offerings of grain, butter, or oil may have been given to unseen forces. In these flames, perhaps, people sought connection to the heavens, to ancestors, to the cycles that ruled their lives. The river itself was sacred. To the Indus people, water was not merely survival, but life's very spirit. It flowed steadily, flooded in seasons, carried soot that nourished fields. To draw water from a well, to step into a bath, to sail upon its surface, all these may have carried ritual significance, acts both practical and spiritual. The river was a god, the guardian giver. Imagine a festival in Harappa. Families gather in open squares, musicians play flutes and drums, dancers move in circles. Offerings of grain and flowers are placed upon small altars. The air is filled with laughter, music, and the scent of food. Children carry clay toys shaped like bowls and birds imitating the sacred animals of their culture. Fire flickers in the distance, smoke curling into the sky. The community celebrates not conquest, not rulers, but the turning of seasons, the gifts of water, the renewal of life. What is striking is not only what we find, but what we do not. There are no massive temples towering above the cities, no statues of gods demanding fear. Instead, the sacred scenes woven into the ordinary, in wells and courtyards and baths, in figurines. The Indus people remind us that devotion does not always require grandeur. Sometimes it thrives in simplicity, in the quiet presence of water, fire, and earth. As night falls, picture the city beneath the stars. Families gather around lamps, smoke drifts gently upward. The river reflects the moon. Somewhere a small altar glows with offerings. A drum beats softly, voices chant in rhythm. It is not a grand spectacle, but a whisper of the sacred woven into life itself. And as you rest tonight, let this whisper surround you. The Indus Valley, though silent in text, still breathes through its rituals, its symbols, its sacred spaces. It reminds us that the divine need not shout. Sometimes it whispers, gently, through water, fire, and stars.